And you can see how messy this gets, so just remember, I told you to wear clothes that you don't care about.
Today we're going to teach you how to make a bleach print. We're going to dye some fabric, imprint a pecan leaf on it, and show you how you can add it to your home.
Doing a bleach print is a great introduction to printmaking. Bleach is a household item, it's really accessible and affordable, and it's a great way to introduce yourself to this medium. A bleach print is a negative print, meaning that it strips away the dye material from the surface rather than adding pigment to the surface. We use this process at our fall install for Magnolia Market. We created a giant wall covering using bleach prints, and that was 13 feet tall. So It was a pretty huge bleach print. We're gonna shrink it down and make it a little bit more attainable for the home.
So we're going to show you how to do this process. You can copy and paste this onto just about any fabric that you want, but we're going to do it on a material and stretch it so you can hang it on your wall. You're also going to need something for your print. Pecan leaves are super accessible here in Texas, so that's what we're doing. And this is also what we used in the market during our fall install. The leaves themselves are quite thin, so it's easy to roll out and get all the detail of the veins onto our print. And we love detail.
When you're foraging for your leaf, go ahead and pick it off of the woody branch. We don't really want that thickness while we're rolling it out. Go ahead and get whatever leaf that you're using just on its normal stem that's not super thick. We're going to do this in a few steps. We're going to prep our space, we'll dye our fabric, we'll do our bleach print, and then we'll show you how to display it in your home.
So make sure you've got your plastic laid out nice and tidy to keep your workspace clean so you don't get your dye everywhere. So let's go ahead. That's all prepped. Let's get dyeing. Always get your gloves first. And keep our hands clean. I have had many red hands during this process. We're gonna work in a 2.5 quart paint bucket. We're gonna use 1 liter of water inside of it. So you can, whatever will fit 1 liter if you're going with our recipe to work with. You just wanna make sure you have enough water to submerge your material fully in it. Typically, rule of thumb is you wanna dye more fabric than you're actually gonna use. Once your fabric is dyed and dry, you will lay it out and then cut it to the size of what you're going to stretch it on. That way, if there's like a little imperfection or something, you have room to shift it around. It's better to have more than less of what you need. So what we're going to be dyeing today is about 1 yard of fabric that's cut in half lengthwise. So let's get started. We're gonna shake up our dyes. Yes, make sure the lid is really secure because I have come to a bottle of liquid dye, given it a good shake, and gotten a surprise.
Yes. So the reason that we're shaking this up is we want to make sure that the pigment dispersion is really even throughout the dye as we pour it. So just give it a good shake right beforehand.
I'm gonna go ahead, now that we've gotten them shaken up, pour it into the lid and very slowly add the liquid into the water so it doesn't splash. So I did 3 cupfuls of cocoa, 1 cupful of eggplant, and 1 cupful of dark brown. Now that I've applied all of those into my water, I'm gonna give them a good stir and make sure that there's nothing settling on the bottom, that each dye is evenly distributed. And also, I always try to make sure that I hit all the little droplets that are on the edge of my bucket. Sometimes even go in with a paper towel and clean it up, because if you are bringing your fabric in and you have a little bit of dark brown on the edge, you're gonna get a smudge. And I like to keep things clean just to make it as efficient and even as possible.
Since this is not fully to scale, what I'm gonna do real quick is just cut a little corner off there. And Megan, since you've got dirty hands,
Great.
Go ahead.
So before we dye our full piece of fabric, we want to make sure that the dye is good, the color that we want, and evenly distributed. So I am pulling out a sample piece that we just cut off of the corner to make sure that our dye is what we want. It looks like the dye is even, I'm not seeing any blotches, and I feel like this is a beautiful deep color. It's gonna be a little different once it dries, but it's a beautiful deep color that's gonna have a high contrast against our bleach print. So I think we're ready to go ahead and dye our big piece.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this into the dye for Megan, since she probably has little bits of this dye on her gloves right now, and we don't wanna accidentally dot or stain our fabric with that. So we're just gonna stick it into the top. You can use your stir stick to kind of shove it down in there. A hot tip for if you are working with a smaller bucket like this is you can get your fabric damp beforehand, and that will help aid in uniform absorption. Right now, I'm really trying to unfold my fabric a little bit in here and just make sure that every single part is getting dyed. Now I'm gonna do a Megan. Stop using my stir stick.
There's a certain point where you're like, I'm just gonna use my hands.
Yeah. And all I'm doing is I'm just trying, and you can see how messy this gets, so just remember, I told you to wear clothes that you don't care about. I'm just trying to pull it out because it's really easy for it to stay splotchy in there if it's all crumpled up. Yeah, so I feel like the whole thing is covered now, and I feel like it's been in here for about a minute, which is what our goal was. We probably wanted to soak this dye for about 1 minute. So we're just gonna wring it out. It's not really dripping much anymore, so we're gonna plop it in a new bucket, and then we'll take it to the sink. We'll rinse it under the water until the dye doesn't come out anymore. If you don't have a slop sink in your home, in the laundry room or anything like that, I recommend going outside and using a hose. This dye will leave residue in a normal sink, so just be prepared for that.
So once your water runs clear, you can hang it up to dry.
So once your fabric is fully dried, it's gonna look a little something like this, which it's really pretty.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I love it. Way to go. Good recipe.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we move on to bleaching our fabric, let's go ahead and cut this down to a workable size for our project. So we want to use a frame that's going to be about 12 by 18 inches.
Okay.
So when we do that, we want to give ourselves a lot of extra room. So I'm gonna leave myself a few inches at this side. Just gonna do, since we're not really gonna see this up here, I'm gonna give myself a little pencil mark. And 18 inches from there is about down here. So I'm gonna actually give myself even a couple more inches because I always like a little bit of extra room. So this is a good amount of workable space. Even our cut right now doesn't have to be super straight or super perfect. And in fact, I'm just gonna start a little snip right there, and muslin will rip in any direction. So we're just gonna rip it because we're not gonna see the edge of our fabric when we display it. So there we go. There is our piece that we're gonna use. For this next step in the project, you're gonna lay out a brand new piece of painter's plastic on your table, just like you did before. You're gonna need your pecan leaf, your dowel or whatever you choose to roll it out, your foam roller, and then you're also gonna need a couple pieces of painter's plastic that are cut to just slightly bigger than the piece of fabric that you're working with.
You just need to make sure that your roller is gonna be able to fit into whatever you choose to put your bleach in. So we're gonna go ahead and get our bleach. I'm just gonna do a little coating on the very bottom. You don't need much bleach at all. Before we touch the bleach, we wanna make sure we know where our pecan leaf is going and what our vision is with this print. So we are gonna place our leaf in the center, remembering that we are gonna be stretching this material around. So center is best so we have a little bit more workable room on the edges. While placing your pecan leaf and deciding how you want it, you do have an option of whether you are gonna do it vein down or vein up. I prefer vein up because when we roll it out with our bleach print, the rolling is gonna hit the veins, and you may think vein down is gonna be more detailed, but the pressure is gonna apply that detail on the opposite side. I want it to be a little bit more organized and a little bit more tiny, detailed and intricate for this print. So I'm gonna choose to do it face down, vein up for our print today. Once you've decided the placement and which side you're gonna lay your leaf down, we're gonna remove it off of our fabric so we can apply our bleach to it. So since we're doing face down, we're gonna lay it face up while we apply our bleach, since that's what's gonna be touching the fabric. I like to squeeze as much bleach out of the roller as I can because drips are not our friends in this process. It's important to keep it clean and organized. We're gonna do just a very light layer of the bleach all down the leaf, covering as much detail as we can, but we really don't want it to be sopping wet.
You just want to be thorough, make sure you're going over everything, make sure the whole surface looks pretty uniformly wet.
Now that our pecan has been rolled out with bleach, I'm gonna very carefully pick this up. And this is why we don't want our leaf sopping, because we are gonna move it over our fabric. So I'm going to remember where I had my leaf placed originally and kind of hover over that, making sure my leaves are going to lay well as I go. It's nice that our leaves are staying very straight as we lay it down. So I'm gonna give them a little touch and make sure it's not gonna move and shift, and make sure my fabric is laying down flat. And Hillary, since she has clean hands, is gonna cover this with plastic. We cover it with plastic so that our surface stays clean and it helps the leaf not shift around too much as we roll it out with our dowel. So what I'm gonna do with our dowel or rolling pin, whatever circular object you find to apply pressure to your leaf, I am just gonna start at the end, not at the very tip, and just work my way up and down the pecan. I like to go along the stem first, and in the process, if you need to flatten out your plastic, please do so. Move very slowly, but apply as much pressure as you safely can to your dowel, rolling up and down your leaves. So I have rolled out my leaf over the plastic. Now it's time to take off our plastic, remove our leaf, and see what print we've got. Let's take a look.
Yep. Ooh, pretty.
Yay! You can instantly see that bleach has been applied and that it is a pecan print on the fabric, but over time the bleach is going to continue to work its magic. We are going to let it develop for at least an hour, and then you can rinse it if you choose. Since I did such a small amount of bleach on it, I don't think we're going to need to rinse this one, but if yours is developing very quickly, that means you have a lot of bleach on there and you're going to want to rinse it so it doesn't continue to eat up your fabric.
Now we're going to talk about how to display this on the wall of your home. There's many ways to do this. You could just hang it up as a tapestry. You could put it in a frame. The way that we would like to show you is how to stretch this in the manner of a gallery canvas over stretcher bars. So these are stretcher bars. You can find them in the painting aisle at any arts and crafts store. They are simple pieces of pine that have these notches in the corners so they'll be able to snap together. So you have to buy stretcher bars just one by one. They don't come in a pack, but you're always gonna need two of the same size. So make sure that you're buying two 12-inch and two 18-inch. The next important thing that we're gonna need is our staple gun. So the staples are what are going to hold our fabric onto our stretcher bars. And then we're also going to use a hammer just to pound our staples into the stretcher bars. So I'm gonna show you how to snap these stretcher bars together.
Great.
So these little notches actually serve a purpose. So you'll notice when you put them together, you can just kind of wiggle them. It won't always be perfectly square. You're gonna have to work with it. There we go. We'll just keep going around, but there we go. We've got our structure and we're ready to go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our print and we're actually gonna flip it over on its face. I'm gonna try to get this print just generally centered. So the secret to stretching stuff like this is that we need to work in opposites. So I'm gonna start with my long edges and I'm gonna put a staple on one side. Just gonna pull it slightly taut for this first one. I want my staple to run parallel along the edge of the bar. I'm gonna come to the other side, and this is where I'm gonna start to pull it a little bit more. You might see a bit of a crease come across the edge. It's okay, it'll go away. Now watch your fingers. Okay, now we've got our two across. We're gonna come to our short sides. Roughly in the middle, I'm gonna pull down. Add a staple there. I'll flip her around. And on the other short side, I'm gonna pull again. This is where we wanna start kind of getting tight. Put one there. So now we've got a staple at our 4 center points. I'm gonna go back to my first long side. I'm gonna pull, and I'll add a staple on either side of my first staple. So we're gonna keep stapling evenly until we get to the corner and we can't staple anymore. Okay, so I think we're ready to do our corners now. So for our corners, I like to do just a really simple fold. It's nothing fancy. So imagine you're kind of wrapping a Christmas present. Just gonna fold it over on the short end. Once you've got it in place, there we go. I think that's pretty good. So now that I have all of my staples in, just gonna come in with my hammer and find these ones that are maybe up a little bit. See how that's already pulling on that one little point? You can see that it's starting to run. I'm gonna hammer this in. This whole crossbar is gonna hold that down now. So there's not so much pressure on just one point, and it has less of a probability of snagging and ripping the fabric.
Nice.
Yeah, and this is also the point at which, before we flip it over, we can kind of cut some of our fabric off. Otherwise, it's gonna kind of hang over the side a little bit. All right, what do you think?
Let's flip her over.
She's pretty.
Yes. I love that we have a little bit more of an imprint at the top than the bottom, but there's a good amount of detail. You can see the veins.
Yeah, this is a really unique one.
Well, I'm so happy with it. The way we dyed the fabric turned out really well. We have a great nuanced color. The bleach print turned out really great. We rolled it out in a manner to where you can see the veins evenly distributed throughout the pecan leaf, and you can tell that it's a pecan leaf, which is a success in itself.
Yeah.
And the way you stretched it, it looks really great.
Thanks.
Well, great. We hope you've had so much fun following along with us, creating your bleach print, experimenting, and making it your own.
Yeah, this is a great project if you're looking for a way to experiment with printmaking or just using natural objects to make art for your walls. We've really enjoyed this whole process as we made them for the market and been able to show them to you. I hope that you had fun following along with us.